The price of gold is really, it fluctuates, of course it does, but it's the value of gold rather than its price fluctuates, but it's pretty constant through the centuries. And that's why you've got to tie your fiat currency to the value of gold with a proper, as you put it, exchangeable gold standard, so that anyone, not just some elite, can walk into a bank and say, I've got your notes here, I want to be paid in gold coin, exchange them for gold coin. So important.
Yeah.
And we're not going to get there, because I think, I'd be interested in your view on this. I think that central banks are getting very possessive about gold. They don't want to lose, they don't want to give it to the public. I mean, the great unwashed, my God, no, we central banks, we hold the gold.
Despite soaring inflation in 2022, gold prices experienced an unexpected decline for much of the year, largely due to the US dollar's strong performance against other currencies. However, persistent inflation and growing recession fears helped push gold prices higher in the latter part of 2022 and into early 2023. As inflationary pressures and economic uncertainty persist, the appeal of gold as a safe haven asset has resurfaced, reflecting a historical pattern Alasdair Macleod, economist and investment strategist, highlights in his analyses. According to Macleod, gold's remarkable stability over centuries reinforces its status as a long-term store of value. Unlike many assets that fluctuate with market cycles, gold prices, when measured against goods, have remained relatively stable over thousands of years. This enduring value is why investors often turn to gold in times of economic distress. It tends to hold its liquidity and value even during downturns, moving inversely to big swings in the stock market. When the US dollar loses value, as it did between 1998 and 2008, investors often turn to gold for stability. During this time, gold prices nearly tripled, reaching $1,000 an ounce in early 2008, and then almost doubled from 2008 to 2012, surpassing $2,000 an ounce. Changes in the dollar's value, influenced by economic conditions and global events, can drive shifts in gold demand as investors seek to protect against currency depreciation. Central banks have recently accelerated their gold accumulation, underscoring the metal's significance as a reserve asset. Macleod points out that central banks are increasingly reluctant to release gold to the public, opting instead to strengthen their reserves. Global central banks hold 12.1% of the world's gold, marking the highest level since the 1990s, a figure that has more than doubled in the past decade. Countries like China, India, Turkey, and Poland are leading this trend, each seeking a robust hedge against currency volatility. China, in particular, reached a new milestone in 2024, with 2,264 tons of gold accounting for 5.4% of its foreign reserves. Make sure to tune in for our expert analysis. Don't miss out on future content. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to stay in the loop. Your support is greatly appreciated.
So we knew that was, that it was unlikely we'd actually get the announcement of a new gold-backed BRICS currency. And not only that, but people who were sort of supposed to be experts in the whole thing were making comments which was just such rubbish, like 40% gold and 60% currencies. I mean, come on, that just doesn't work. They don't understand credit. They don't understand that credit is created out of thin air. And that's the way actually the world works. So, the commentary on this was so obviously wrong. And it is clear that the whole decision about a BRICS currency is essentially political. I think that's the key thing. Now, the reason I say that is that as far as Russia is concerned, she has not only the gold resources. I mean, I'm told that apart from what the Central Bank of Russia has, there are additional gold resources in the order of about 10,000 tons held in, if you like, sovereign wealth funds.
Russia?
Yeah, Russia.
10,000 tons?
Yeah. So they've got about 12,000 in total.
Huge reserves in the ground.
Yeah, I think that, that total perhaps gives some comfort that they can do this, but it's actually not that necessary, and I'll tell you why in a moment. Asset which is no longer part of the monetary system. Why is the Bank of England, or why is the Treasury holding on to it? We're going to get rid of it, and we're going to give the proceeds to the deserving poor around the world, or something like that. A load of hogwash. Anyway, I was thinking actually while you were talking about prices. You mentioned prices, and how people begin to realize that currency is fiat rather than something which retains its value. But we still have this situation where when you get the general level of prices rising, people don't understand that what's happening is the purchasing power of their currency is falling. And I mean, this is something that politicians have tried to stamp on. The first recorded one in history was Diocletian in about 303 AD. Firstly, that he was trying to counteract the effects of the debasement of his coinage and the loss of confidence in it, which is also an important factor. And the result was that the edict of maximum prices, under penalty of death, meant that any butcher, baker, candlestick maker in Rome just shut up shop and left, and that the city emptied. He didn't realize that actually it was the result of the debasement of the currency at the time, the denarius. The other thing that told us, which is actually something fascinating, is that if you look at the table of maximum prices, you can see that the prices for things that we would use today are actually quite similar to what they were 1,500 years ago in gold.
Yeah.
In other words, the price of gold is, pretty, it fluctuates, of course it does, but it's the value of gold rather than its price fluctuates, but it's pretty constant through the centuries. And that's why you've got to tie your fiat currency to the value of gold with a proper, as you put it, exchangeable gold standard, so that anyone, not just some elite, can walk into a bank and say, I've got your notes here, I want to be paid in gold coin, exchange them for gold coin. That's so important. Yeah. And we're not going to get there, because I think, and I'd be interested in your view on this, I think that central banks are getting very possessive about gold. They don't want to lose, they don't want to give it to the public. I mean, the great unwashed, my God, no, we central banks.
The core personal consumption expenditure index grew by 2.2% in the second quarter. This was slightly above estimates of 2.1%, but notably lower than the previous quarter's 2.8% gain. Released amid ongoing scrutiny of Federal Reserve policy, the data have investors closely watching for clues on how much further the Fed might reduce interest rates in 2024. According to the CME FedWatch tool, market sentiment going into Wednesday's release indicated a 99% chance the Fed would cut rates by 25 basis points in its upcoming meeting. Economist Alasdair Macleod provides a broader view on inflation, interpreting it as a decline in the dollar's purchasing power. He points to capital moving out of the dollar into assets like gold, suggesting that investors seek gold as a hedge against devaluation. Macleod argues that when the dollar's purchasing power decreases faster than government inflation statistics indicate, it reveals an undercurrent of inflation that official figures may not fully capture. As central banks worldwide move to safeguard their reserves, the Reserve Bank of India recently made headlines by transporting 102 tons of gold from the Bank of England's vaults in London to secure locations within India. The move, announced on Dhanteras, a festival associated with wealth and prosperity, signals India's commitment to strengthening its domestic gold holdings. Such actions align with a broader trend of central banks bolstering their gold reserves to hedge against currency risks and inflationary pressures.
I mean, when it comes to inflation, I view inflation as a fall in the purchasing power of the currency. Mm-hmm. What I see in dollar terms is money getting out of the dollar and getting into whatever else, and that whatever else is gold. And that tells us who's buying it, so I'll come to that in a moment. But the point is that if the purchasing power of the dollar is going down at a faster rate, then the inflation, if you like, of goods, even though the government statistics will never tell the truth about this, from the foreigner's point of view, remembering that foreigners at the moment have something like 32 trillion invested in US dollars and underlying assets, financial assets. I'm not talking about physical property and things like that. They've got to have a reason to hold on to that, or even a reason to add to it in order to stabilize the currency against other currencies. They're looking at this and they're thinking, hold on, there's a debt trap here. The debts are increasing. We have got an election coming up, and the budget deficit until September 25 is likely to be, well, let's chuck a figure in the air, 2.5 to 3 trillion, something like that, with these spendthrifts. Could be even more, because if Trump gets in, he's talking about cutting taxes to spur growth. He's got the truss, the truss approach, as it were. And he's going to make up any differences or deficiencies by raising tariffs. Tariffs tell me two things. First of all, it's going to add to that perceived rate of inflation because the consumer will end up paying the tariffs. And the second point about it is that we have forgotten the effects of the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act in 1930, which plunged the whole world into an absolute crisis, particularly in a global farming crisis, which admittedly was aided by the invention of the tractor some 20 years earlier. So, the problems that we had in America, there's no doubt at all that they were made considerably worse by Hoover's. Well, it was actually put in by Herbert Hoover. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act, if Trump tries to do the same thing, and I have no doubt that he will try and do it. So, looking at it as a foreigner, let's say the People's Bank of China or whatever, do I want dollars? Do I? Hell is like. I'm going to get out of these dollars as quickly as I can. So what do I sell? What do I buy? I sell dollars for euros? No. Yeah, no. My own currency? The problem is that the dollar goes, the whole caboodle goes. So my only protection is to buy gold. And the interesting thing is that if you talk to analysts in the London gold markets, they can see perhaps half to 60% of the demand for gold. The rest of it is hidden. They just don't see it. So as far as they're concerned, there's a whole lump of gold being mined and coming in as scrap, which they can't identify where it's going. And this tells me that it's going outside reporting, which basically, say, if you look at customs, that customs cover non-monetary gold. So this is gold effectively going into central banks, wealth funds, anything that is, if you like, government and quasi-monetary. Now, you see the amounts going through. I mean, they're absolutely huge. And it so happens that the amount of gold which appears to be missing marries in quite well with Russia's output, China's output, the CIS states' output, and various others in that camp, the BRICS Shanghai Cooperation Organization camp. It seems to me the word is out amongst these guys at the highest level that the dollar is going down, perhaps partly as a result of what we're doing, but for God's sake, get out of dollars. And they're doing that by going into gold.
Gold's enduring appeal as a hedge against economic instability and currency volatility remains evident as both individual investors and central banks increase their holdings. With inflationary pressures and global uncertainties continuing to influence markets, gold's stability and liquidity are driving heightened demand, underscoring its role as a safe haven asset. The recent trend of central banks accumulating gold aligns with their efforts to protect national reserves and mitigate the impacts of fluctuating currencies. Given current economic challenges, how do you see gold fitting into a balanced investment strategy for long-term stability? Share your perspective in the comment section. If the video resonates with you, join our community by subscribing to our channel and enabling notifications with the bell icon. Thank you for being a part of our community.